My encounter occurred in June of 1988, which is now more than 20 years ago. Nonetheless, the facts are as clear as if no time had gone at all. As a consequence of being born 2 months too soon, both my identical twin sister and I struggled mightily with severe asthma. I took a prescription for my asthma, and for whatever reason, by the time I was 19, it had reached a level in my system that was potentially harmful. My near-death experience was caused by poisoning, notwithstanding the inability of the medical professionals to determine the reason for it. This is how my tale goes. Before meeting up with a buddy for lunch on a day in Minnesota that was unusually warm for the month of June, I had spent some time basking in the sun. When I started to feel nauseous, we were at the restaurant placing our orders when we decided to leave. I started to feel nauseous, my hands started shaking, and I had a feverish feeling. Our lunch eventually arrived, but because my symptoms had become so severe, I was unable to consume anything. I needed to get home, so I asked a buddy to drive me there, but on the way, we had to make a pit stop because I had to throw up. Because I had been in the light, I wondered whether there was a connection between the two. We arrived at my house, and as soon as my mother saw me, she immediately dialed the number for the emergency room of the nearby hospital. They acted as though I had suffered from heat stroke and advised my mother to have me take a chilly bath, which ended up being beneficial. Because I was completely worn out, I decided to go to my room and sleep. The events that followed are impossible to describe in words. I had the impression that I was in a location that existed outside of time. I had the impression that I was surrounded by an energy that went beyond what we understand to be love when it comes in the shape of a human being. Then there was complete mayhem, and I was being transported to the hospital in an ambulance. My identical twin sister, who slept in the same room as me, told me afterwards that she had been startled awake by a gurgling sound that originated from me. I was experiencing a seizure at the time. I was struggling for oxygen as my back was arched, my head was drawn back, and I was stiff. Mucus was flowing out of the sides of my lips. The next thing I remember, reportedly, is choking on some phlegm, stopping my breathing, and becoming a bluish-gray color. My sister managed to muster the ability to do the Heimlich technique, which was necessary in order to expel the mucus. After the mucus was dislodged, I took a big breath and proceeded to have seizures. My sister screamed for my mother, who immediately dialed 911, and off I went to the emergency room. I remember very little of the actual seizing itself and more of what happened after that. It would appear that the seizures were difficult to put under control, due to the fact that both my heart rate and blood pressure were at alarmingly high levels. I went into cardiac arrest. I found myself once again immersed in the ethereal, love-filled nothingness. They gave me an electric shock in order to get a pulse, but both my blood pressure and heart rate had fallen to potentially life-threatening levels. I was in a coma for 3.5 days after I passed out. I recall being in the cardiac intensive care unit when it happened, and I was able to leave my body. I had the sensation of being a buoyant, light ball of energy. I was standing at the far corner of my room and looked at myself diagonally from head to toe. When I was lying there connected up to all of the devices, I remember thinking how odd my body looked. It didn't look like me. At one time, my manager came in to visit me, and she was really concerned about how I was doing. When she first saw my lifeless corpse, she spat and covered her mouth with her hand. I tried to give her some words of consolation, but she was so upset that she couldn't hear me and raced out of the room. After then, I'm not really sure what took place. I merely have a vague recollection of being in what I can most accurately characterize as an endless, wide nothingness. It was almost as though I were just lounging about there. Even though I didn't see a light, I could feel the energy of love. It was a strong and magnificent sensation of both serenity and love. It was a very serene experience. As I type, that picture and sensation immediately come into focus. I knew I couldn't remain there, despite the fact that I didn't want to leave the place in the first place. I completely lost track of time. It wasn't until much later that I found out my sister had rested her head on my chest on the day that would turn out to be the final day of the coma. She told me that all of a sudden she saw a picture of myself dressed in full medical gear with a bright light in the background. She said that the image was quite clear. It would appear like I stated, "Don't worry about me, everything is going to be okay. I have a lot of things to discuss with you." I have no recollection of ever having a conversation with her. but I'm considering trying hypnosis to see if it can help me recall more of my past. At that time, she leapt to her feet and dashed off to reassure my loved ones that I would be all right. I eventually came out of the coma not long after that. Waking up, I was rendered medically disabled as a result of the several IVs and other lines that were inserted into me. My hands were also shackled at the wrists to prevent me from removing any equipment or central lines that were inserted into me. I remember hearing what I refer to as the echo in my brain, which were meaningless phrases bouncing about in my head. Mary Jo, if you can hear and understand me, grasp my hand. Mary Jo, if you can hear and understand me, squeeze my hand. I was able to sense my chest expanding and contracting on its own. I was being kept alive by a ventilator. Even though I couldn't move a muscle in my body, I was nevertheless able to comply with the order and squeeze the hand. As soon as I opened them, I noticed a woman sobbing. It took me a few hours, but in the end I was able to figure out that it was my mother who had called. I was very perplexed by the situation. I was surrounded with balloons and greeting cards. It was difficult to take everything in, particularly the sights, sounds, and scents, as well as the feelings of others who were around me. My entire body was in excruciating pain, and I had no idea what had just taken place. It was like a dream. After attending speech therapy, physical therapy, and occupational therapy for a few weeks, I was finally able to leave the hospital. Unbelievably, I made it out of there unscathed in terms of my heart. I was unable to speak, yet the seizures did not leave any lasting harm to my brain. I was able to make a complete recovery. The deadly toxicity of the drug caused enzyme levels to skyrocket, and although my muscles were painful, there was no lasting damage to them either. Despite this, the lethal toxicity of the prescription caused me to die. My doctor would later tell me that there was nothing they could have done to save me, that someone or something intervened, and that it was a miracle that I had lived. He said that it was a miracle that I had survived. She told me that because of that, my life had a reason for being and a purpose. When I got home, I was feeling alone, furious, and bewildered, and I had no idea what my purpose was or what had taken place. Despite this, I chose to pursue further education in speech pathology, which eventually led to my current position as an interpreter for the sign language community. I felt a strong calling to minister to others and assist them in finding healing just as I had. Because there was no follow-up, I decided to keep my experience to myself for the most part. 20 years would pass before I would utter the first word of my tale. Because I let so much into my life, I struggled with despair and, at times, anxiety. However, the feeling of love and serenity that I experienced will never leave me. I had the strong desire to go back to that tranquil location. But at the same time, I had this profound awareness that I needed to complete my journey here on Earth first. I developed a hypersensitive nervous system. I watched what I like to think of as movies that show me what other people are going through, particularly in regard to the healing process. I immediately realized that telling other people what I saw was not a smart idea since it would just make them sad, so I decided to keep what I saw to myself. Working with my spirit guides and the other realms of spirit would eventually teach me how to control what I was seeing. I still have a high level of sensitivity. In fact, if I don't learn to control it, it can hinder both my performance at work and my overall happiness in life. I am often left feeling depleted and exhausted. The nature of my encounter has continued to become clearer. Meditation, Reiki, and exercise are all beneficial, as is having conversations with other people who share similar spiritual views. It seems as though I'm being shown snippets and pieces of what happened, as well as the information I need to know in order to complete my task here. I feel a profound sense of a mission, although I'm not really sure what that mission entails. I went on to earn a master's degree in negotiation, conflict resolution, and peace building after I completed my undergraduate studies. The promotion of peace seems to fit in very well with the goals I've set for myself, but I'm not really sure how to go about it. Despite this, I have faith that things will go as they have been.